Hey everybody, it's Tyler Austin from Midgard Strength and Conditioning. Thank you so much for watching. So I'm going to take a video here. I'm going to answer a question that a lot of people will ask in regards to powerlifting, and that is why powerlifters tend, particularly the really high, top tier ones, tend to squat more than they deadlift. A lot of people who watch old school powerlifting videos, they'll see a guy like Ed Cohn squat 1,000 pounds, but then he'll pull, somewhere in the 800s, or Kirk Kowalski pull squat like 1,000 pounds and then only pull like in the high 700s. And they wonder why that is, because for most people who do barbell training, who do proper barbell-based strength training, most of those people, the overwhelming majority of those people, are going to deadlift fairly significantly more than they're going to squat. So seeing the opposite happen in competition is a little bit weird to a lot of these people, particularly if they haven't competed before. So I'm going to answer this question. I'm going to talk about primarily old school powerlifting, so the days of Ed Cohn, Kirk Kowalski, Doug Furness, that kind of era of powerlifting, not modern powerlifting, because modern powerlifting, basically anything post-2000s, is a clown show with the ridiculous amount of gear, 4-ply squat suits, monoliths, squatting 2 inches high. It's just a clown show, so I'm not going to talk about that or comment on that. But in regards to old school powerlifting, again, days of Ed Cohn, Kirk Kowalski, and so forth, what you would see, particularly, let's just take Ed Cohn for an example, because he's the greatest of all time. Ed Cohn, he would squat well over 1,000 in competition, and then pull either in the typically in the high 800s. Some meets he did pull in the 900s, or there was one meet he pulled in the 900s, and so there's about 100-pound gap between his squat and his deadlift. So why is that? Why do powerlifters, particularly top tier powerlifters, tend to squat more than they deadlift? Well, there's 3 reasons. Number one, a lot of top-tier powerlifters are built to squat, meaning they are short-legged, particularly short-femored, and long torso, which means that they are built to squat. Like if you take a guy like Kirk Kowalski, you can see this type of anthropometry. Short-legged, particularly short-femored, long torsoed, which means that they are able to stay a little bit more upright in their squat, and they just have a shorter range of motion, a shorter distance to travel in their squat because they're short-legged, particularly short-femored especially. So they are built to squat, and a lot of top-tier powerlifters are built like this because, well, it's a preferable anthropometry for the squat. So that's one main reason. Not to say there aren't powerlifters, really top-tier powerlifters that weren't built that way or had a very different build than that, but as a general rule, that's what you're going to see within top-tier powerlifters. And that short-legged, long torso anthropometry is not terribly conducive to the deadlift. So it's a benefit in the squat, but it's generally seen as a disadvantage in the deadlift because longer back means just a longer moment arm that works on the back and the bottom of the deadlift. Shorter legs, you don't get as much leg drive out of the bottom. Typically, a longer legged, shorter torso individual actually tends to be a better build for the deadlift. So that's number one. The second reason is, although in old school powerlifting the gear was minimal, there was gear. So in the squat, they were able to use knee wraps and a super suit, which was like a very basic 1-ply suit, if that. And although the gear was minimal, in the squat, talking about the squat in particular, it did add about 10% to someone's squat. So a 900-pound raw squatter, if they added the knee wraps and the suit, which is what they use in competition, it would get a 900-pound raw squatter to typically about 1,000 pounds, right? So it added about 10% to one's squat, give or take. And this is not a benefit you get in the deadlift back then, because back then there were no deadlift suits or any other types of gear for the deadlift. So all deadlifts back then, again, talking about in the days of Kirk Kowalski and Ed Cohn, all the deadlifts were raw. So they didn't have that gear benefit that the squat had. And that's another big reason where, that's another real big gap in the deadlift in terms of competition, because in training, particularly, if you're comparing raw squat to raw deadlift, a lot of these lifters actually, their squat and their deadlift were pretty equal. Like, again, I would just use Ed Cohn as an example because he's a good example. Ed Cohn in training, he could pull over 900, right? He could deadlift 900. I think one of his best pulls was like a 900 for a double, right? So he could pull over 900. And it's safe to assume, because Ed Cohn was a 1,000-pound squatter in knee wraps and a super suit, he could probably squat in the 900s, in the low 900s, probably raw for a single, right? So comparing those numbers, the squat and the deadlift are actually roughly equal if you're talking about, raw squat compared to a raw deadlift in training. Now, the third reason, this is also another real big reason, is that the deadlift is at the end of the meet as opposed to the squat being at the beginning of the meet. So you're fresh for all your squats. So, obviously you do 3 attempt squats, 3 heavy attempts, so 3 heavy singles in the squat. Then you do your benching, and by the time you get to your deadlifts, it's already been a long day and you're already pretty fatigued from your squat. So, you squat 1,000 pounds for your last attempt in the squat a few hours ago, then you did your benches, and then now you're finally getting to your deadlift. So by the time you get to your deadlift, it's already been a long day, and you're already pre-fatigued from your really heavy squats. So that's another reason why powerlifters, again, top-tier powerlifters, tend to not deadlift as much, particularly in competitions they can in training, but as certainly as compared to their squats, because the squat being the first lift of the meet, you're fresh for those attempts, as opposed to deadlift being at the very end of the meet where you're already pre-fatigued from, the rest of the meet beforehand. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, informative, and entertaining. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow depending on where you're watching this. You can follow me on Instagram at Tyler_Midgard Strength, and I am also on Zion. My 2 community pages are Midgard Strength and Conditioning and Gungnir Strategic. You can scan their respective codes here or search for them on the community search page. If you like my strength and conditioning content, check out my podcast, the Classical Strength Podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. Finally, if you would like to become stronger and healthier than you've ever been in your life, consider hiring me as your coach. I offer the most effective and personalized online coaching in the industry. So if that's something that would interest you, visit my website, midgardstrength.com, or you can email me directly at tyler@midgardstrength.com. Thanks for watching.